Hello, everyone on the call. Happy Tuesday. Thank you for those of you that have joined so far. We're going to be talking today about reducing rental losses using lease guarantee. I've been working really closely with this project, actually, and I've been working on introducing it to our members. So I thought a webinar would be a great way to answer all of your guys' questions. For a little bit about me, my name is Alexandra. I'm the Director of Education. I also work with marketing here at AAOA and really just educating our members on the programs that we have available and also, too, some landlord quick tips so you guys can better manage your properties. So before we start, I would like to just let you guys know there is a question box on the right-hand side of your screen. We also have about 4 handouts that I've prepared for you. These are all relating to lease guarantee. You guys may have seen some of them already, but if you do want to download any of them, you certainly can from that screen on your box. If you don't see it, don't worry about it. I can always email them to you after the webinar. Tomorrow, I will be sending you guys all the recording of this. So take notes and pay attention, but you can actually see it tomorrow if you do want to go back and review. With that being said, just want to go over here real quick on today's agenda. When good tenants turn bad. So we're going to cover why is it that there are so many times where you might think you have a good tenant and you might do your due diligence, but somehow something just doesn't end up right. And is there something you can do to prevent it? What can you do? Then we're going to talk about lease guarantee benefits and how that's going to fit into this good tenant turning bad situation. Activation. If you do want to go forward with lease guarantee, how does it work in terms of getting it activated? And then how does it work in terms of reimbursement, which is definitely the main question we always get, right? What's the catch? What are the hoops? Honestly, we want to be really straightforward with you on this, so I am going to go into detail on reimbursement. And lastly, Q&A. Okay, and if you guys know me and any webinars I've done, I really stick to the agenda. So we're going to try to keep it at 40 minutes. I'm going to go through everything, and if you guys do have questions, please jot them down into the question box. I will address them afterwards. Now, before we start, I actually did want to get you guys involved in a little poll question. So first thing I want to ask you is, have you ever lost money due to, due to a tenant not paying rent? Okay, so let's see here. Just go ahead and click in yes or no if you've ever lost money due to a tenant causing damages or non-payment of rent. I'm assuming if you guys are on this call, you might have already been burned by a tenant. Hopefully not, though, but I'm very curious to see what your answers are. So I'll give you just a few more seconds here to weigh in on losses that you might have had. So this is above and beyond the security deposit, right? So you're losing money because you can't use the security deposit. You ran out, basically. All right, so let's close this out. I see most of you have voted in. And let's share the results. All right, so it looks like 63% of you said yes, 38% said no. So a lot of you have had this issue with tenants of losing out on rental payments or damages. So definitely normal for that to happen in the landlord world. Now, next question I wanted to ask you guys is, have you ever evicted a tenant? Okay, so this would mean you've served the notice, you've started to take them to court, and you did that whole process. Maybe you hired an attorney, maybe you did it on your own, but you did get to court eventually with an eviction there. All right. Again, some more answers. And it's pretty close, actually. I'm going to go ahead and close it out here, and let's share the results. So it's a 60-40 split. 60% of you said yes, 40% of you said no. So that's interesting. So a lot of you have had an eviction here in the past. Okay, so good to know. I'm going to go ahead and move forward here with the webinar, and we'll talk about these situations of when good tenants turn bad. So think to yourself why that might have happened. So for those of you that did answer yes on both these questions or one of them, was it that you didn't screen the tenant properly? Or was it that it was something that you didn't see coming? So a lot of times you might carefully select an applicant, but as you know, there's really no guarantee that that person is going to actually be able to pay you. And then a lot of times too, you might actually just have a bad apple. And there are a few little secrets that I'm going to let you guys in on that tenants do to actually prevent you from knowing that they've had an eviction or problems paying rent in the past. So the first thing I want to share with you is 3-day notices and late payments are not public record, okay? So just because someone has paid late and the landlord maybe has issued a dozen 3-day notices to pay rent or quit, and then they catch up and then they come back maybe, or maybe they don't. But the point is you would never know without talking to that landlord that this person has had a history of paying late or that they've had a history of these 3-day notices or whatever day notices you may give. So that's something people are not aware of. They think that there's some sort of record in the court, but there's not. Even if you file for the eviction, even then it's probably not going to show up. And so that leaves you really to only the data of actual court judgments. Secondly, most landlords don't bother taking a tenant to court. So maybe they never paid their rent, okay? Or maybe they were late multiple times. The landlord might not even think it's worth it. They might not even know how to take a tenant to court, and they might just take it as a loss as part of being a landlord, and then nobody would know. So that's another issue, and that's something that some tenants try to rely on. They hope that you don't take them to court so that they can get away with this, basically. The third one is they just got evicted, but it hasn't been recorded yet. This is an important one. So somebody who's in a big rush to move into your rental, that's a red flag. Why? Well, a lot of times if you just had an eviction and you're currently being evicted, it hasn't been recorded. Maybe the case is still open. So in that case, as a Fair Credit Reporting Act compliant company, and as well for you, you can't hold something like that against them until they've actually gone through and been found guilty of the of the eviction. And the same thing goes for criminal records. So they're banking that it's going to take long enough that they can draw out the process that they'll be able to find a new place, and that landlord won't know about that current eviction that is still open and still being tried in court. And there's really nothing you can do about that to find out. Courts can be really slow and backlogged, and that's another problem. 4, they go by different alias names. So here's the thing, is if they provide you information that's incorrect, an incorrect date of birth, social, or alias name, it gets harder. Every time something is a little bit different than what is actually their identity, it gets a little harder for you to find out if they do have any public records in their name. And so a lot of times they'll try. And they hope that you don't check or you don't do a background check and find out that maybe they're using a different name or maybe a different date of birth or social. So bottom line, a first impression and sometimes even screening is not enough. Sometimes we can screen all we want, but some of these records just simply won't show up, or the information they give you simply won't be valid. So 7 reasons a tenant might not pay you. You guys are probably familiar with this, but I'm going to cover it anyway because I think it is relevant. Number 1 is medical reasons. So not always is it a bad intention. Sometimes a tenant can get sick, and for medical reasons or maybe family members get sick, they have to leave the unit early or perhaps maybe cannot afford to pay rent. Second, unemployment. Also something that is unpredictable, right? So we hope that you have, some employment background for this person or at least a steady stream of income from some source that you can verify. But regardless, you still never know when unemployment could be around the corner. Third, they break a lease early. So maybe they are paying you on time, but something happens. They get a new job, they have to leave to take care of a family member, something in their life changes. They decide to break the lease early, you're left with a vacancy, and therefore you're losing rent money for that time that it's vacant that you weren't expecting it to be vacant. Fourth, just plain old irresponsibility, okay? So people have rent payments, but then they also have all these other things that they want to pay and this lifestyle they want to live. Maybe they're young or they just don't understand their priorities, and that could lead to them not paying you rent. Bankruptcy is another really related to irresponsibility. Sometimes, though, it could be a divorce or something that causes them to just get behind, and then it's a ripple effect. Fourth, a co-tenant stops paying. So we see this a lot with a couple or maybe with friends. One of them decides they don't want to live there anymore. They get in a fight, they leave, and then the one tenant that's there can't afford to pay both people's share. That's why it's important to have both co-tenants on the lease agreement. So if you do have to pursue them in court, you can go after both of them for it. The last one is can't afford damages. So maybe they damage the property, they can't afford to fix it, and the security deposit may not cover it. So that's also another time where you might actually end up losing money. So what can you do? Get LeaseGuarantee. So that's why we're here on this call today. I think for many years, people have just accepted that these are part of the risk of being a landlord, and that being a landlord is going to be hard and you will lose money. But with LeaseGuarantee, what we've tried to do here at AAOA is introduce something that gives you another option, right? So we don't want to have to give in to being completely okay at will to whatever your tenant decides. If they decide that they don't want to pay, or if they maybe have some issue that comes into their life, you don't want to be affected by that. And sometimes you can't prevent these things no matter how much you screen a tenant. So LeaseGuarantee is actually something that can protect your lease so that if any of these things happen, or when they do, because it's pretty common as we saw from a survey, that LeaseGuarantee can actually help you get reimbursed for those losses. So let's get into a little bit about the LeaseGuarantee benefits. So LeaseGuarantee, as I mentioned, is something that covers the lease and allows you to get reimbursed after maybe somebody stops paying rent, leaves damages, or if you have to go through an eviction process. So number one benefit, protect your rental income, right? So we never want to lose rental income, but inadvertently it will happen either through maintenance or through non-payment of rent, but LeaseGuarantee helps to reduce that and to protect the rental income that you're getting. Secondly, fill a vacancy faster. So if you have LeaseGuarantee, right, and you know that that person is under that LeaseGuarantee contract, then you might be willing to rent to more people, maybe people who you normally would not have rented to. Just because if they have the lease guarantee, you know you're going to get paid that amount of money for the entire rental agreement, no matter if you have to end up taking them to court or if they leave damages or just leave early. So definitely filling a vacancy faster is helpful. Obviously, anytime your unit is left vacant, you are losing money, right? It's not like you're paying but out of pocket for like a damage, but you're not getting income. And you have an income property. So definitely filling a vacancy should be at the top of your priority list. Third, help tenants qualify. So this is an interesting one. A lot of tenants are having a hard time qualifying because they have bad credit, no credit, maybe just don't have the money to even pay for a security deposit or multiple months of security deposit. So this gives them some help. And normally you might say, why would I want to help tenants qualify? I mean, if they're not qualified, they're not qualified. But in this case, it does help you because you can fill your vacancy faster and the risk to you is actually pretty much stable or actually reduced if you have the lease guarantee. Lastly, peace of mind, right? So not having to worry about losing income on a regular basis, that is something that in my mind is priceless. One of the biggest problems of being a landlord is really the stress that comes along with all of these things. And so even though those things are going to happen most likely, because that's just the nature of it, you don't have to worry about at least not losing money over those things. So another thing I want to talk about with benefits, we get this question a lot, is LeaseGuarantee like renter's insurance? So I wanted to just take this time to show you a little bit about what the difference is between LeaseGuarantee and renter's insurance. And yes, they are very different. So lease guarantee is actually for intentional damages. So for that reason, it's not really insurance. These are things that people have come into your home or your rental home, and they've basically intentionally damaged or intentionally not paid rent to you. And that would be something that is different than renter's insurance, which are accidental damages. So accidental would be, okay, a hurricane comes through and totally just destroys the house, or maybe there's theft, maybe even liability coming through on your end that you might need to pay for if somebody gets hurt on the property, for example. So here, no deductible for lease guarantee. Great thing. You've already paid for the lease guarantee, so why pay a deductible to use it? In this case, you can just use it. So that's something you don't need to worry about. Renter's insurance always has deductibles, and to be honest, they're pretty high. I tried using renter's insurance actually a few months ago. I had theft in my out of my car, which parked in my garage, and I thought, oh great, well I have renter's insurance, I could just use this. And they took my laptop, and the cost of the laptop was just about the same as the deductible, so it wasn't really much use for me in that end. So that's definitely one of the benefits of using lease guarantee as well. You don't have to worry about those deductibles. Third, it's paid up front for lease guarantee, whereas renter's insurance is paid monthly. And lastly, lease guarantee supplements a deposit. So renter's insurance doesn't really do that. What it does is, again, it actually helps you with accidental damages. So that's different than things that you would normally take out of a security deposit. And renter's insurance does cover liability, so it's still smart to get it, right? Because you want your tenants to, if somebody were to get hurt or something were to happen on the property, to cover your liability for that as a landlord, just in case. So it's good to have both, is what I'm trying to say here, but they are very different. And that's why we wanted to introduce lease guarantee to our members, because it really fills in a gap that traditional renter's insurance and other types of homeowners insurance doesn't actually cover. So that being said, let's talk a little bit about activation. How do you even get this thing? So some of you guys might have been ordering tenant screening reports. You might have seen it on the report. We have a whole new section called the Lease Guarantee Analyzer, but I want to talk to you a little bit about what it means. So first of all, you have to order an AAOA screening package. So package would be here, the red, white, blue, or gold. You guys might be familiar. All of these include a credit report and an eviction report. And so those are the minimum packages that we would need to have in order to analyze that person's credit and eviction report and determine whether or not they qualify for lease guarantee. So I get this question a lot because we see sometimes it says lease guarantee analyzer, eligible or not eligible. And so sometimes people think, oh, they're eligible, so they must be a great tenant. No, that is not what we're trying to do. Eligible just means that they meet the minimum qualifications. Most tenants will qualify, and that's because we've set the minimums pretty low in terms of we want a lot of people to qualify. That's the whole point of lease guarantee, is to qualify people who are maybe a little bit riskier, people who you might normally not rent to. So in that case, almost all tenants will. Now, if they don't qualify, it could be because either they have multiple evictions, just really bad credit history, or maybe the social security number doesn't match the name. So remember earlier I was talking about how important it is to have correct information for the tenant in order to find evictions, right? To have the right name and social and date of birth. So if we find that that doesn't match, they'll automatically be disqualified. It's very important that you have the correct information when screening, just in general, because it really does affect the accuracy of the results. Bad data in, bad results out. So we want to make sure that that's as accurate as possible. All right, what is this for new tenants? I also get this question a lot too. Can I just put all my existing tenants under lease guarantee? And the answer is, unfortunately, no. The point is to have this for new tenants that are coming into your unit. Now, if you wanted to get started on that, now would be a good time as ever, right? So for any new tenants that you have coming in, if you're already screening them with AAOA, great. If you're not, you should be, or screening them somehow, right, through our system. And then from there, you'll know if they qualify for the lease guarantee. Secondly, only one lease guarantee is required per lease agreement. So if you have multiple tenants, you only need to get one lease guarantee, or they would need to only get one lease guarantee. And there's a 10-day offer expiration from the date that you purchased the package. So just be aware of that. If you do need an an offer extension, if you need more than 10 days, sometimes, these things can take longer than that, then please feel free to reach out to us and we would be happy to extend that for you. So, true cost of an eviction. So for those of you on the call, I have one more question for you, and this has to do with the cost of an eviction. So, have you evicted a tenant? And if you did, how much did it cost you? So I'm putting it up here on the screen. If you guys could just go in and put your votes. I would love to see how much you guys have been paying if you have had those evictions happen. And I know from our last survey, it was about 40% of you or so that have had an eviction experience. So let's continue with that. Great. All right, I'm going to share with you the results here. Okay, so most of you did vote less than 2,500, which is fantastic. That's actually pretty low considering the average. And then 2,500 to 5,000 was about 40% of you, okay? So what I wanted to do here as well is talk a little bit about the true cost of an eviction. So what are the key costs? For those of you that are familiar and you guys have evicted it, you guys are probably way too familiar with this, unfortunately, but the key costs are lost rent, usually on average 3 months. It's usually the rent that's owed, plus during the eviction, they're not going to probably pay you. And then after, you might have a vacancy. So we estimate about 3 months of lost rent. Lawyer and court fees and repairs and other. So let's go over what those are. So lost rent, just an estimate, $3,000 if you had, $1,000 a month of rent that was owed for 3 months. Lawyer on average is going to be $500, although you could do it yourself if you feel comfortable with that. Court costs are $150. That's all the filing fees, all that good stuff. Sheriff, sometimes you might have to pay a sheriff to do the writ of possession. So that's another little cost. And repairs. What about a new locksmith? You have to change your locks. You might have to do repairs that exceed the security deposit. Remember, you probably don't have the security deposit anymore at this point. And then you have cleaning fees as well. So, you really think they're going to clean if you're about to evict them? So a lot of times these units, especially in some areas, can really get beat up when they go through an eviction. It's unfortunately one of the side effects. So when we add all these costs together, it's about $5,300 for a true cost of an eviction. So I don't know if you guys were considering all of these different items in your totals, but it can be pretty expensive. And regardless, nobody wants to spend a dime, right? Why even spend $1 and have that not paid to you if it's owed to you, right? So the idea here is just to illustrate what it really costs. So what are your activation options? With that in mind, I'm going to take you guys over to our website because I want to show you the different options that are available to you. So this is a test website for a Jonathan consumer, right? So what I'm going to do here is click on his report. And this is how you would actually activate the lease guarantee. When you're looking at the report results, it's going to show you the lease guarantee analyzer at the top of the report. And it's going to tell you if they're eligible or not. So let's see here. View completed report now. And then if you click here on Get Lease Guarantee, it'll take you to this page. So these are our base rates for the different levels of protection. So it starts at 2,500, 5,000, 7,500, and 10,000. So just based on your guys' answers, most of you guys are going to land here in between these two different plans. These are our most popular ones. So really, we would recommend these for maybe a higher value rental in maybe a higher income area. These here, though, these are the base rates. So either you can pay for it or you can bill your tenant for it. And what I'm going to do is go over the different options of and advantages of doing one versus the other. If you do bill my tenant, you're going to get this option here to provide the tenant's email. It might already be auto-filled. And then you sign off that it's okay and invite. And when you click that, it should send out an invite to them to pay for it. And it'll say that you're inviting them, and that's part of maybe the condition for them to rent out your unit. Or you can do all pay for it and enter in your own billing information. And that would either way make you the beneficiary. So regardless, the benefit is to you and the lease guarantee is issued out to you. So let's go back over to the lease guarantee. And we're going to go from the current slide. So what are the advantages? Tenant pay in addition to a security deposit. So let's say you get somebody, maybe they don't meet all of your qualifications. Okay, you might have kind of an iffy candidate. What I would suggest for that is say, hey, you can rent, but you need to get lease guarantee in addition to a security deposit. So a lot of times traditionally what landlords will do is they'll say, okay, we need another month of security deposit, maybe higher rent or a co-signer or something like that. But a lot of times that is out of reach for some tenants. And so they might not have the money to do it. They might not have a co-signer who can actually do it for them either. So having this as an option is cheaper for them. It's in addition to the security deposit, but it still provides you with the protection and the risk management aspect of it. So next one, instead of a co-signer, again, not everybody has somebody that is willing to co-sign for them. Third, to reduce the security deposit. So I actually have a client that I spoke to recently that does this. They actually say, okay, the security deposit is $1,000. And if you want to get the lease guarantee, then we'll make your security deposit $700, and then $300 will go towards the lease guarantee activation. And so in that case, that person can now afford it, right? But you're also getting the additional protection. We also have the landlord pay, so you might wonder when landlords might do that. It's either if the tenant pays them directly, they might just go online and purchase it, or if they want to charge the tenant monthly for it. I've had some landlords that do split it up over the 12 months of the lease. The only issue there is if they do end up defaulting, you might not get paid the full amount for it, but some landlords are okay with that and they think it's a good, middle ground, or just as an investment. So some landlords just say, hey, just like I pay for insurance or like I pay for maintenance and pay for renovations, this is just one of the expenses that I'm going to build in order to mitigate my risk as a landlord, and that's worth it in itself. So how to request reimbursement. This is also a very hot topic, right? So we want to know what it really requires. It is pretty simple. One, report tenancy changes or notices. So if you have somebody new move in that gets added to the lease, or if you have somebody break the lease, or maybe come up with an agreement for them to move out, or you serve them a 3-day notice, we would want to be informed of that. So just let us know when that does occur and keep copies of all those records. 2, a court judgment is required. So regardless of what the reason is for, it could be non-payment of rent, it could be damages, it could be breaking a lease early. A lot of landlords, I don't really know why exactly, they don't go through the full process of doing a court judgment. And I think part of it is because they don't think that they can ever collect it. So it's like, what's the point, right, of going through all this trouble? But really, if you have the lease guarantee and you get the judgment, once you have that, the hard part is collecting it. And with lease guarantee, you'll actually get reimbursed when the judgment comes through. So that's a worry and a concern that you wouldn't have. A court judgment basically would need to list all the names of the people on the lease, and those would have to match the names of the names on the court judgment. So make sure to just include everybody. 3 is the lease agreement itself. So again, the names on the lease have to match the names on the court judgment. And same thing with the rental apps. So also the rental apps match the names on the lease and the court judgment and any notices. So as long as the names match, you're good to go. Obviously, if that person had a bunch of people move in and then it's changed to a different owner or something like that, they wouldn't be valid. But in all other cases, and this should be pretty simple, you probably already have these documents anyway. I mean, you should be keeping them. So that's really all that's required to get a reimbursement. Now let's talk a little bit about how it works in terms of dollars. So I'm going to give you an example. Example one, let's say you got a court judgment for $4,600. Okay, so that's going to be about a pretty common amount for a judgment. And let's say you did the protection plan of the $5,000. So in this case, you would get reimbursed $4,600. So the point is you get reimbursed up to the judgment amount, but if you have a protection plan that is above that, you would still only get reimbursed for the judgment. So it's judgment or protection plan, whichever one is less. So then for another example here, in terms of maybe a higher judgment of $5,200, then let's say you got the protection plan of $5,000, your reimbursement would be $5,000. So it would cap out at that total amount. So the idea here is you want to make sure you pick a protection plan that makes sense for you and your rental and how much the rental is, how much you are willing to maybe risk here on this. The 5,000 one is one of our most popular ones, so I think that's usually a pretty safe bet when it comes to picking the right protection plan. All right, post-reimbursement, and we're wrapping it up here. Post-reimbursement, what happens? So you've received a check in the mail. Awesome. Well, you don't need to do anything else. You don't need to hunt down any tenants. Normally what would happen if you guys haven't gone through it yet is with an eviction, the tenants are given about 5 years to repay you. That's a long time, first of all. And second of all, they could skip out. You could lose track of them. They don't necessarily have to pay you right away. There's no real consequence necessarily. So you don't need to do any of that. The idea is that at that point, it becomes the lease guarantee's issue, not yours. No collection agency needed. So a lot of times, if a landlord can't collect the judgment amount, they will hire a collection agency to do it for them and maybe pay them a percentage of whatever they're able to collect. And that's all fine and dandy, but what if that collection agency can't collect? And then if they do, like I said, you're still paying them to do it. And so that can also be expensive and take a long time. Third, no losses. So if you pick the right protection plan and you also have the lease guarantee, all sorted out, you've officially not lost any money, maybe time, right? Because you did have to take them to court. But that's something you would have done anyway. At least I hope you would, because it's just not right to just let that hang out there and not get your money back on it. So the idea here is you don't really need to do anything after your reimbursement. And I just want to share with you a couple quick facts before I let you go. We're wrapping up here. One is collection agencies have less than a 17% success rate. Think about that, 17%. That's pretty low. I wouldn't want to bet on 17% on anything. And if that means that a collection agency only has 17% of tracking down my tenant and getting a judgment from them, maybe garnishing wages and whatnot, that's not a really great success rate. Also, too, not taken into consideration in this stat is how long it takes for them to do it. So that doesn't mean 17% success rate in a month or two. This means 17% success rate over the course of 5 years, which is what the tenant has to pay back. So not super great, right? Also, I saw the statistic somewhere. I need to verify the legitimacy of it, honestly, but I see it in a lot of places, and they say 80% of judgments are never collected. I tend to believe it's kind of true, just with what I've heard, and also in terms of just, again, the lack of consequence for the tenant. It seems pretty normal that if they're getting evicted or, thrown out for, excessive damages, that kind of person is probably not really in a hurry to pay you back. So just something, food for thought, just something to think about. So with that being said, we are at our Q&A, and I hope I answered all of your questions already. That's kind of the whole point of this webinar. Again, this is something really new. Lease Guarantee is, as far as I know, the only nationwide program that does this. There are some that are local or statewide or maybe offered by a specific property management company just to their customers. But in terms of something that is as far reaching as Lease Guarantee, this is actually, the most far reaching. So I would love to hear any of your questions about Lease Guarantee. So feel free to type it into the question box on the right-hand side if you have anything there for me, and I'll go ahead and answer it for you. And also, too, if you guys think of any questions later, you could always email me, and I'd be happy to respond to you on anything related to Lease Guarantee. Okay, I got my first question here. Somebody is asking if the lease agreement doesn't start for a month after we get lease guarantee, is it possible to move the start date of the lease guarantee? So yes, it is. So the start date is the day that the lease guarantee is paid. But if the lease agreement doesn't start for another week or month, please let us know. We'd be happy to change the start date for you to match whatever's on your lease agreement. Here's another one from Rebecca. The amount that is due, is it an annual fee? Yes, Rebecca, it is an annual fee that is paid upfront either by you or your tenant. And again, like I was saying, some landlords, they will pay for it upfront, but then maybe charge their tenants monthly if you wanted to do it that way and help them out. But again, you still don't know if they would be able to go through with all the payments. Here we go. If lease guarantee is paid, would the tenant's credit score be impacted? And this is from June. Good question. And yes, the tenant score would be, let me see if I understand the question. So let's say that you had to file for reimbursement, and the tenant ended up not paying lease guarantee, the money that was owed. Yes, the tenant's credit score would be impacted. So lease guarantee would pursue the tenant to the full extent of the law on, and then at that point it's lease guarantee's issue. You've already been paid out, but yes, lease guarantee would actually fully pursue the tenant, and that may involve their credit score getting impacted. So there is a consequence to it, and of course let your tenants know that there is if they are agreeing to the lease guarantee. In fact, having the lease guarantee itself could even be a motivation to pay rent on time, because they will be pursued for sure if they don't pay their rent or pay the judgment. Okay. Another quick question. Is there a floor or ceiling of the rental amount? For Brenda Seagraves. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Brenda, if there's a floor or ceiling of the rental amount. The rental amount can be as much as you want it to be. In terms of if you had a higher rent amount, or you might want to have a higher lease guarantee plan. If you have a lower rent amount, you might want to go for the lower one. Typically, I would say, the lowest one is $2,500. Brenda, you say you have a low rent amount of $500. That would be actually pretty reasonable, just because if you were to lose out on, a couple months of rent, if you had to evict the person, plus maybe damages, court fees, and, attorney fees, you would probably end up spending close to that anyway. So, there's no floor or ceiling. It's up to you how much you want to charge for rent. But in terms of picking your protection plan, it just might influence, which protection plan you pick. And let's see here. Scythe has asked, I think that's how you say your name. When you say court judgment for reimbursement, is it from the district court or from the civil judgment? Either one. It just has to be a judgment. Usually these evictions will go through civil courts first, or small claims courts. So if that's the case, then any judgment from a court that shows that it's in favor of the landlord with the stated amount, and a lot of times these judgment amounts will actually include your attorney fees and also maybe your court costs as well. So we would then reimburse you for the full court judgment, regardless of which court it has gone to. Okay, so great. You're welcome, Brenda and Saif. You're welcome. Okay, so I think, let's see. Well, we just got one from June. How could I factor tenants' payment on their credit score for the case that they didn't pay the court judgment? I'm not sure what you mean by that, June. You mean like if the tenant didn't pay their rent, how can you report it to the credit bureaus? Is that what you mean? Okay, yeah, you could. You could report it to the credit bureaus. So if you guys currently have a tenant that hasn't paid you for a court judgment, you can report them to the credit bureaus. Something you can do on your own right now without the lease guarantee even. So if you want to, you can go to rentrecoveryservice.com is the affiliate that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and put it here in the chat to all of you guys so you guys have the website. This is a great service. I think it's like $20 or $25. You just register on their website, and they'll send a series of letters to the applicant, to the tenant, ex-tenant, and have them prompt them to pay. If they don't respond to the letters and they don't pay, then they report it over to the credit bureau, and that'll actually be a negative mark on their credit score and will lower their score. So it's definitely something I would highly recommend doing if anybody owes you money. And a lot of times with the threat of it lowering their credit score, they might actually be more motivated to pay or maybe work something out with you. Also, Rent Recovery Service has an additional service too, where they can actually do, depending on the state, garnish wages or maybe other types of assets to then get the money that's owed for you. And they would charge you contingency, so it's a percentage of whatever it is that they're able to successfully collect. So is there a time period on unpaid rent, say 3 years back? Well, Brenda, it depends on the state. So I would still contact Rent Recovery Service and ask them. A lot of times you can go back further than you may think. They don't have to be current tenants, and you don't have to even have a judgment in a lot of cases. Again, it does vary per state. We're actually going to be having a webinar in just a couple of weeks that's going to be just on collection agency services. So we're going to be covering, basically, we're going to have the collection agency come on and do a webinar for us, and they're going to cover exactly how and when and what kind of actions you should take for, these kinds of situations. And of course, this would all be for tenants that you don't have lease guarantee for, right? So hopefully in the future, if you guys do get the lease guarantee, you guys will not have to worry about working with the collection agency at all, right? You'll already have the money in your pocket. So the idea here is to not need that kind of service. So, and then June, you have another question here about the judgments. Yes, definitely look forward to the seminar. I will send you guys all a link to it if you guys want on the email tomorrow. That way you can register for it. I think it's in a couple of weeks, I want to say. I think it's in July, actually. So I have to check the date on it again. But it's going to be fantastic, especially for any of you guys that currently have money owed to you. I highly recommend joining that. So with that said, I think we're wrapping up here on our time limit. I promised you guys I wouldn't keep you too long. So with that said, you guys are getting the recording tomorrow again. And also, if you want any of the handouts, if you weren't able to download them, please let me know. And I hope you guys did get a lot out of this. And please reach out to me with any questions, lease guarantee or otherwise. I absolutely love helping our members really do the best and have the best decisions made for their property and their rental income. So please reach out to me. Alexandra@aaoa.com is my email. So go ahead and put that in there for you guys. And also, there's going to be a post-webinar survey. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this webinar. And also, if you want to suggest any future topics for us to cover, that would really help. I try to find speakers that will accommodate those topics. So please, if there's anything you want to learn about, put it in that suggestion at the end when we close out the webinar. With that being said, I hope you guys have a wonderful day, wonderful Tuesday. And thank you so much for joining.